Today we will introduce you to ISACA Orange County chapter. We are a non-profit California organization. Our organization was founded in 2009. Since then, we have been serving ISACA members. My name is Victor Monga. I'm serving as a board member of the chapter. For those of you who might be interested in learning more about me, please connect me over LinkedIn or Twitter. Our chapter mission statement is to offer education and networking platforms to our members and continue to improve that experience. Our chapter offers a variety of services, such as training for ISACA certifications. Our members not only find new jobs having these certifications, but also advances their career after obtaining training and certification from ISACA. We host events for our members to share industry trending topics or even to network with each other. Our Capture the Flag events have been a great success where members had hands-on experience to apply their knowledge in the cybersecurity realm. Our chapter members are well-diverse and spread over different industries. They are decision makers and leaders for top organizations. We host more than 30 events every year for about 1,000 members. Our members can share their blogs on our website or even can record a 15-minute talk with us, which can be posted on our channel for our members to learn, share, and network. This is a great way to show your knowledge and get feedback from communities which are like-minded, such as yourself. If you or someone you know would like to be a speaker with us, please submit your topic at speakerforum.isacaoc.com. We cannot serve our community alone. We partner with organizations who believe in giving back to the community and participating. If you are one of those organizations, please submit your interest at sponsorforum.isacaoc.com. The last but not the least, we are a volunteer-led organization. None of our officers or directors are paid positions. We encourage every member to consider contributing your time so we can continue providing all of these offerings and services which helped you and can help others in future. Involve yourself today by going to volunteerforum.isacaoc.com. We are so proud and excited to share our official organization LinkedIn and Twitter profiles. Please trust only these profiles as official chapter sources of social media posts. You can scan the QR code on the screen to point you to our social media pages. As always, our chapter success is only measured on one metric: member satisfaction. If you have any questions, feedback, we chapter leaders encourage you to contact us by emailing contact@isacaoc.com.
Here, hi everyone. This is Nemi George. I'm the chapter president for ISACA Orange County. We've started a new process to simplify the way you collect CPEs. So going forward, if you haven't already, when you register for any ISACA Orange County event, if you provide your email as well as your ISACA a membership number, we will be able to automatically upload CPEs for you to ISACA's global membership or CPE portal. That obviously is a great deal of help as we get through to the end of the year as you collate your CPE points. You're not required to provide your ISACA number. If you don't, we will still be able to email you a PDF copy of your attendance certificate, a little bit like you see on the screen here. But if you want to make the process completely seamless, then please provide us with your ISACA number and we can get it uploaded directly to ISACA for you. For the month of October, we're planning a C-risk training. We've also created an online form to call for speakers. One of the things that we try to do as a chapter is diversify the speaking pool that we have. So if you do have topics that you want to speak about, or you have friends, colleagues, or you've met a speaker that you think would be, as a chapter, would benefit from hearing from, please ask them to fill out this form at speakerform.isacaoc.com, and someone will get back to them to get an abstract, get a bio, and we'll try to schedule them at one of our next events. We're also encouraging everyone to get involved with the chapter. Victor introduced the new ISACA Orange County website, isacaoc.com. One of the two ways you can get involved with us is by submitting blogs. And we have a dedicated page on our website for that. We also encourage folks to do what we're referring to as lightning talks. So if you do have a topic, you don't want to write about it, feel free to contact us we can set up a 15-minute recording where we can discuss your idea, a topic of your choice, and we can have that posted on our website as well. So those are two areas to engage with us. I'm also pleased to announce the speakers for this evening, Blue Hexagon. In addition to speaking today, they've also agreed to be our exclusive platinum sponsor and partner for the next year. So every year we choose one vendor partner to be our exclusive partner for that year, and Blue Hexagon has decided to sponsor us for the next 12 months. And so we kind of introduce you to them today, and there'll be a lot more coming from them over the next 12 months.
So I'm joined with by Irfan Asrar, who is head of threat research for Blue Hexagon, and I'm the VP of marketing. I manage all things in outbound communication and marketing for Blue Hexagon. So today we're going to talk about how artificial intelligence can help accelerate network threat protection, and also threat intelligence that Irfan will dive deeper into. So just for those of you who are not well aware about who Blue Hexagon is, we're about 2.5-year-old company, well funded by tier 1 VCs, including Benchmark and Altimeter. And we've gotten a number of awards that I'm proud to share with you, including recognition by leading analysts in the industry, such as Gartner, where they have recognized us in their market guide for the 2020 network detection and response. And also Forbes has recognized us in a number of lists, including the most promising artificial intelligence companies in the US, the top AI 50 list. Also, they recently published a top 25 enterprise software startups list, and we were very pleased and honored to be on that list. I mean, that's a list that they drew across, I think, almost 15,000 different startups in the software industry. As you're aware, it's a very large industry, a lot of startups innovating on various aspects. So we're really pleased to be on that list. And of course, we've been featured in CNBC, ZDNet, and the AI 100 as well. And we are SOC compliant and CCP and GDPR compliant as well. So really happy about the progress that we have made in the short 2.5 years, and we're getting good traction in the marketplace. So just as an introduction as to what is the problem that we are really solving, this is this kind of age-old problem, if you would, that we keep seeing threats are slipping through, and we were scratching our heads 2.5 years ago as to why is it that this is happening. And we just did a full survey across the entire gamut of all the various tools. We looked at the signature-based detection, and we saw that yes, they were very good at known threats, but when it comes to unknown threats, there is a delay, and there's a certain amount of time during which you see patient zero. Patient zero is basically a result of a 0-day threat that comes through. Then the second solution that people were using was a sandbox solution, where you take the file and you submit that file to a sandbox service or a software, and what it does is detonates that file and then tries to observe its behavior and see if it is malicious or not. And that takes a definite amount of time, right? And sometimes the hackers are very smart and they know how to evade the sandbox. So there's all kinds of things that they've now understood and become very intelligent about how to evade sandbox. So there is a little bit of a delay there. Also that you need to queue your file, so it's not an unlimited amount of capacity, and therefore it's sometimes inconsistent, and it working as a real-time protection while the file is traversing the network is kind of hard, right? The third aspect, which is one of the reasons why so many threats are slipping through, is just there is this, I call it threat tsunami. We've never seen as many threats as we are seeing today, and at the speed at which they come. There's, I think the last check I did was there's 1 billion, malware samples out there, and that are practically impossible to keep, track of in terms of having all of the signatures, but also, the other solutions that are being used, which is the, SIM, these, security information and event management systems, and also the endpoint detection and response. These solutions are good, not to say that they're not required, they're part of a layered defense and they're lower in the layered defense architecture, if you would. So by the time they get to see it, some level of infection has already happened, right? So you're detecting after an infection with these solutions. And the need for a network security solution to evolve is that, can it actually work as a first line of defense? And can it actually detect before infection? And that's the goal that we set ourselves out to achieve. And we then did a survey across a number of different rules, and static rules, and also dynamic evolving threat rules, and try to basically do a map. And what you see on the left-hand side is essentially how many of these rules are catering or looking for different types of or categories of threats. So you see that big yellow band, over 70% of those rules were really looking for malware. But the problem is that malware is one of that category which is fast evolving, and variations are very easy. And that's what hackers are using. The other ones, while they do change, but they change slowly. So we saw that the opportunity for artificial intelligence is really in this big category. We said, even if we are able to solve this, right, to a 90% extent, that'll be a big step up in terms of defenders being able to protect their networks against the malware hackers and some of the artificial intelligence tools itself that they're using against against the organizations who are trying to protect themselves. So that's the area we're focused on. And the way we do it is think of it as a trifecta or a three-pillar architecture, where we looked at how can we improve detection, how can we improve the defense, and how can we improve the deployment. If you look at these 3 Ds in a kind of architecture or a framework, you start thinking about if it comes to detection, what are we detecting? Are we able to detect 0-day? Are we able to detect it in real time, which means literally in millisecond in our framework, and that's how our solution is built. That we focused on achieving a sub-second detection, whether it is a known or an unknown threat or a malware, right? Without any previous knowledge, without requiring signatures, and without running it in a sandbox. That's the big step up that artificial intelligence technology that Blue Hexagon team has developed has actually made a big stride there. Then it comes to defense, right? Like, are we defending it using all of the orchestration, right, within the security ecosystem? We realize we're not on an island, right? We have to work within the security ecosystem, and we then have to participate. And one, we can leverage and use some of the other enforcement systems that you have in place, whether it is on the endpoint or it is in terms of a SIM or a SOAR, or you have other mechanisms, right? So we use all of that. And then deployment has to be flexible, has to give you that ability of deploying it wherever your assets are. Because Irfan will talk a little bit more about this, that why that is so important, that you have to deploy your protection or your security systems where your assets are, whether they're in the cloud, whether it's an email service, maybe you're using Office 365, or you have data centers and private networks or corporate networks that you're protecting. That's where your assets and your users are. So you need to have that flexibility. And I also talk about this as a hybrid deployment, right? It is never one or the other. It is always a mix of cloud, on-prem, and email and other services. And how do we protect that together? And then bring all of that information together onto a single console so that you have a complete view and a picture. So what do we do, right? I mean, some of these things that we do are pretty unique, and you'll probably see this very clearly now, that we are inspecting not just the headers. We're not looking at just the logs. We're looking at the actual traffic, and we inspect the complete payload and the headers.
That's where things have changed quite a bit.
And our artificial intelligence technology is not only able to detect whether it is malicious or benign, but also classify it in real time, and we do that without the threat intelligence or sandbox. So we can tell exactly what it is, right? And then we can help, with the help of orchestration, we can help block and mitigate those threats, which kind of works for you, as a virtual patch in case there is some vulnerabilities that malware or the hacker is trying to exploit. The third point is in how bad is the attack? And you will know this only if you can get a complete view of your entire enterprise, which means across all of the vectors, whether it is in the network, whether it is a web connection, whether it is in the cloud, or whether it is the email. And you should be able to get full context so that you can investigate, analyze, and respond very, very quickly. And that's kind of the solution that we have built here using artificial intelligence end to end, right? AI explainability, and that is actually a first to the industry, from a Blue Hexagon perspective, that we are the first ones, first in terms of the deep learning solution who has added AI explainability. What this provides you is that when we actually are able to, analyze and detect a threat in the network, and if you block it, understand that that malware or threat actually never became successful. But then we can provide you the full verdict translated and mapped to the MITRE attack framework. What that gives you is immense amount of insight and context, and also think of it as a predictive IOC that then you can use for advanced hunting and detection. And this is happening in real time. So think of it as a tool that is now giving you threat intelligence, and Irfan will touch upon this a little bit when he dives deeper into the technical session, is that what it is giving you is giving you threat intelligence for a 0-day practically, right? And that is very, very critical, that instead of having to feed and having to take multiple feeds and depend upon a particular threat intelligence feed coming up to speed and figuring out what that 0-day was, by which time hopefully you've not been the victim and you don't have any patient zeros in your network, that delay can be very counterproductive, or can be very very hurtful. So the solution, right? What is the solution here? One of the big values that Gartner provides is they look at the emerging problems and the problems that need to be addressed, and come up with a new category of solutions every so many years. You remember in 2013, they started promoting the concept of EDR, and that's been very helpful. You've seen the growth in that segment, and you've seen the adoption of EDR across enterprises of all kind, and it's helped immensely in containing some of the issues on the endpoint side. But that's not been enough, and they've been working on a solution on the network side, and they came up with this NDR category. They actually had last year they called it NTA, but that was kind of a partially addressing the problem. This year they changed it to network detection and response, very appropriately. And as I mentioned, they've included us. We're probably the only deep learning, pure deep learning, vendor solution in the 2020 market guide. So what they're saying is that they realize that whether it is firewall, whether it is EDR, or whether it is SIEM, they're missing many of the threats. And they have proposed NDR, which is based upon machine learning analytics. That is, that analytics done on the network traffic to find that suspicious traffic or the threats that these tools are missing. On the right-hand side, you see it is not signature-based. So it's not your traditional IDS on steroids. No, it's actually very different than that. It uses machine learning and deep learning techniques. We push deep learning, and leverage deep learning more than anybody else. But in general, it basically uses machine learning, and without the use of signatures, because signatures you just cannot keep up, and you can't have enough of them, and it takes time. It takes definite amount of time. Also, they talk about north-south, which is the ingress and the egress, and east-west inspection. So you got to do both together, right? And that's important because not only do you want to see the threats which are coming into the network, but threats which may have already made their way into the network and are now laterally moving, and therefore east-west inspection is very important as well. And it's not log analysis or UEBA based. So we at Blue Hexagon looked at, how does this whole thing kind of as a layered defense work, right? So as you see here, the red dot is basically showing a very rapidly evolving threat, right? And for that, you don't have enough time for a log analysis or a SOAR or a SIM platform to operate fast enough. Not to say that those are not important tools. I will never say that you don't have them. You want to have them, but when it comes to fast evolving or rapidly evolving threats, they're kind of like slow to act, right? So that's where you need the NDR, where you see the Blue Hexagon, that artificial intelligence brain with that Hexagon logo. That's where we are able to catch it, and we are in an advantage position that we can catch it at the network edge, or even if it has, through some other vector, come into your network or infected any of the machines, and we see signs of, infection or any other kind of lateral movement, or even, command and control or exfiltration, we will catch it in real time, and using, again, deep learning and artificial intelligence. When it comes to slow evolving threats, then yes, we will catch it. But if, beyond that, the log analytics and SOAR, they will also have a lot of the other information, which you can then use and combine. So we kind of like think of ourselves or NDR as complementing and augmenting EDR and SIM, and completing that layered defense in a very, very strong and reinforced manner. So what's our unique unfair advantage? You probably heard me say deep learning 1,000 times by now, but essentially this is the secret weapon that we bring to the table to help you defend your organization better, right? So it's very similar to this the computer vision learning bounding box. You've probably seen this multiple times, where it can, the deep learning technology for computer vision can easily detect, this is a car, this is a human person, and this is a pole, right? And they can tell you that. And another car, as it's coming in, it can detect that as well. Similar technology we have basically brought to the table for cybersecurity threat detection. So massive amount of data that exists over several years. We've used that and trained our models, and now we're using very advanced techniques to detect literally 99.8% accuracy at the 99.8% accuracy level, the known and unknown threats, and we can do that at millisecond speed, so at sub-second level. Then of course we talked about the defense, right? So orchestration across the ecosystem. Here you see on the right-hand side, Carbon Black, CrowdStrike, Komodo, and of course the Microsoft Defender ATP. We integrate very closely with them, and we can, our signals can be taken and then used as triggers to preemptively, stop any threats from infecting the endpoints, because we have the first ability to detect, and because of our high accuracy and fast speed, we have the advantage that we can, kind of inform and trigger these endpoint security systems to block it ahead of time without an infection or the actual malware or the file, malicious file actually operating and infecting the endpoint. We also work with some of the packet broker solutions like Gigamon and Ixia, both in the on-prem network and also the cloud. And here you see the partnerships that we have, very strong partnerships with Microsoft. We are members of their what they call as MISA, Microsoft Intelligent Security Association. And we're the only network security vendor with deep learning who's part of that, and in conjunction with the Defender ADP integration, it's a very close relationship and partnership with Microsoft. We also work, of course, in their Azure platform in the cloud, and same thing with AWS. With AWS, we are an advanced technology partners with them for over 2 years, and many of the other network security enforcement systems, as well as the cloud systems, you think about the AWS Security Hub, so we integrate with them as well. So next, what I want to do is, just take a couple of minutes and show you this video so you get a taste of how deep learning works. And as this video plays out, you will see that, how the system is training based upon the data and how the models are getting trained. And then later on, you will see that once the models are trained, how they're able to separate out benign versus the malicious samples, and build that model with enough of a representation that they can now detect even a brand new unknown threat. So I'll play this, and then we'll see the magic of it. So you see how they're all smooshed together right now. If the color coding was not used, you'd actually not be able to tell them apart. They all look the same. And now the system is kind of like learning from the data, and the model is getting trained, and it is separating, the representation is separating, as you can see, the different colors, but also they're moving across multiple dimensions and separating them. So you can see the blue is the benign, the red is the ransomware, and the yellows are the crypto miners, and the other color is the information stealer. The model is training, and now you can see that the model was trained at this point. You can see very clearly how the blues is separate versus the yellow. And at some point, now just to test the inference power of this model, we're going to introduce a new variant, and you see the grand crab shows up. I don't know if you can see it's able to tell this gray dot apart, and see how cleanly it's basically figured that out. So it's not getting confused, and this is the accuracy with which it is able to detect. And Irfan is going to show you some more details, and we will actually have this model on the screen for you to understand how a multi-dimensional. This is only showing a few colors and in 3 dimensions. So as data scientists, and as computer scientists, if you can imagine, this is actually representing many dimensions and trying to kind of like aggregate that into only 3 dimensions. So I talked about deployment. We can deploy across the different clouds, so multi-cloud deployment, email, as well as on-prem. But the other point, which is very important to understand, is that we have software and hardware and cloud models. So as your profile changes, as your organization profile changes, for example, we have all gone through this very difficult time in the last several months, where we have to change our architecture. We have to shift our assets to take care of work from home or work from remote, and a lot of the things that we were doing on-prem had to move to the cloud. So in order for you to actually keep the security posture as strong as it was before, you need to have a flexible deployment model where you should be able to move from a hardware appliance on your premises or your data center to a cloud appliance that you can run in AWS or Azure, right? Or if you've shifted your emails from SMTP servers that were on site or in data centers to an Office 365, you should be able to move your security there as well. So we allow that. We allow that very easily, and with the software, virtual software appliances and also cloud models, you can shift them literally within minutes, as soon as you need them.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Thank you, Gajraj. I really appreciate that. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a real honor to be presenting to the members of ISECA, the Orange County chapter. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our generous souls, Nemi George and Victor Monga, for making it possible for us to share what I'd like to call the gospel of deep learning, passing the good word around. A few things about myself. I got involved with cybersecurity before that term officially existed, and I imagine that goes the case for a lot of people on this call, including Gajraj. For me, this was back in the 80s. This was a much simpler time. In fact, my first exposure to the business of cybersecurity was packing up a 5-inch quarter floppy disk into a yellow envelope that contained basically the signatures for malware, and then dropping off at the post office for the first security company that I worked for. This was a weekly thing that eventually turned into, well, it was a monthly thing that turned into a weekly thing, and then everyday thing. So things have changed since then. Things have evolved. I've been very fortunate to be found myself working for Symantec in Japan, moving to McAfee where I managed teams in APAC, then eventually moving back to North America where I worked for Palo Alto Network and ForcePoint before taking on my current role with Blue Hexagon as the head of threat research. So a quick history lesson. Next slide. Remember when I said things were simpler in the 80s? They really were. When it comes to threat intelligence, malware authors were naively transparent, almost to the point they wanted you to know who they were. Malware families like the Jerusalem virus, Friday the 13th, Chernobyl, were examples of a rising subculture that today has almost been forgotten, but has evolved into something very sinister, a business that we call the threat landscape. Fast forward to 34 years, things have changed quite a bit. If anybody has attended my presentation before, you've probably seen this slide that I've presented to several government agencies as well as at other conferences. And you can see the biggest impact, that there is no portion of the planet that has not been impacted by malware. Even regions such as Cuba that have been impacted by sanctions have serious problems with POS and skimmers. So, you know, there's no place on earth. In fact, the last time I presented this, I was also told by an agency working for the Russian government that it's not just, you know, the heavens have not also been spared by the raft of malware. NASA has confirmed that laptops sent to the International Space Agency were accidentally infected, and Russian cosmonauts are notoriously been, you know, seen multiple times accidentally infecting the space agency's computers with infected USBs. So next slide. So here we are 34 years later, some independent stats to basically tell you what the threat landscape is telling you. There's an information overload. Sorry, just get this poll out of the way here. McAfee Labs in their July 2023 threat report recorded 375 threats per minute. FireEye was tracking a total of 1,268 malware families. Out of these families, 50 were never seen before, 0 days, right? State-sponsored threat actors make the weekly news cycle, you know. And when it comes to certain regions of the world, we're actually working with the insurance company to publish some stats on this. Ransomware is earning billions of dollars, where the actual act of actually kidnapping somebody in ransom, that business is declining because of COVID. You know, and things that we talked about, mobile malware, IoT, cloud security, things that were just emerging concepts less than a decade ago have become mainstream security concerns. So with all this data out there, you know, I mean, where threat reports are being published, you start seeing articles on this, the question begs to be asked. Can you use this data to augment risk and governance KPIs that you guys use? We believe the answer to that is yes. We believe data science can help. But before we go further, let's take a quick look at what is threat intelligence, right? Gartner's got a very good definition. They came up with this back in 2013. It still stands. The way I look at this, threat intelligence has to be actionable, where you can make an informed decision or take an action based on actionable you know, signals. The next step, you need to ask two fundamental questions, right? The first one is, what are the assets that need to be protected? And, you know, just like Gajraj described, you have to have the ability to move. You know, if you want to be agile, you need to make sure that you can move your threat protection or controls to where they need to protect the most important assets, right? Right. So you got to ask yourself a question, and you can look at it from the perspective of, let's start from the atomic level. We need to protect social security numbers, you know, health records, and try to figure out exactly, go up a level. Is it stored in the database? Where's that database stored? So it could be kind of abstracted into higher levels, and you know, you end up getting things like database servers, AWS instances, industrial robots, endpoints, right? So the next step is you got to ask, what does the organization's threat profile look like, right? What this means is, do you know who are the people who could benefit the most by targeting you, and by gaining access to those assets you're trying to protect the most, right? What do you know about the threat actors targeting you, your industry space, right? What are things that you've been targeted with in the past and they were successful? And this is my favorite. What are the threat families that are currently targeting you? And do you know all of them, right? Usually what happens is a lot of people, they just focus on the threat families their control measures have failed on, and those are the ones that surface or stand out the most. But the question is, do you know about the ones who are targeted couldn't get through? There's still a risk, right? So if somebody's looking at this framework in front of you right now, this looks very similar to you. This must be very familiar to you if you've used this, if you're coming from a military background or an intelligence community. This approach that you've probably seen is been classified as threat intelligence requirements or priority intelligence requirements. Essentially, it's a huge science, and there's a lot of material on this, and I wish I could go over this in detail. But in a nutshell, the question that you're trying to answer and trying to get intelligence on is the signals that you're currently tracking, are they the right ones to basically roll up into a risk framework or establish where the biggest gaps are, right? Now, this is used by the intelligence community to track, terrorists, groups that are considered to be subversive. And the question of, can this apply to cybersecurity? Yes, you can. But the biggest problem or the fundamental flaw when applying such a framework to cybersecurity, it comes in the implementation and the execution portion, which is how often is the intelligence framework updated? How often do you add new signals? How do you decide when to retire old signals or how to phase them out, right? The threat landscape is constantly changing, and the cyber threat landscape is more complex and fast evolving than anything else, right? So here's how the approach we have taken to this problem. Next slide, please, George. Which is, imagine you're a large global corporation. What we have done here is broken down each of the geographical regions and then monitor threat categories that are targeting each of those respective regions, right? And every time we have done this in the real world, we've seen that there's some regions that have overlapping attack surfaces, where the TIRs and the PRs match up, but other regions are a threat ecosystem on their own, right? And over time, you can track and create trending charts. As you can see, what we've done here for a hypothetical company is you can see July is trending upwards when it comes to certain categories: phishing, Trojans, crypto miners, right? And keep this in the back of your mind, the phishing thing. We'll come back to this as an example for 0 day that we surfaced. And this was a higher level. You can actually go further down a level by saying, let's track the families and the categories between months to see what are we being targeted with, right? So you've got ransomware. It's just the middle of August, but it's getting close to the volume of attacks that you had seen previous months, right? Same thing with banking Trojans, same thing with IoT malware. It tells you where the biggest risks are. And more importantly, from a risk and governance perspective, do you have the right controls in place to deal with these problems, right? So if you start seeing an increase in threat families associated with ransomware, you need to start asking the right questions. Do we have the right controls in place? What does the efficacy look like for the coverage against those threat families? And more importantly, lately, is do you have breach insurance? As a lot of ransomware families have been associated with data breaches, just virtue of the fact that they've been threatening to release all that hijacked data if you don't pay up, right? So you need to ask yourself those questions. So remember what we said earlier about an increase in phishing attacks, right? So this actually happened to us. We actually were working with a foreign entity, and we started seeing the trend where the phishing categories that we had, things were coming out as unknowns. So you had your normal phishing categories such as the Nigerian Sprint scam, the fake Louis Vuitton bags, the fake invoicing scams. And then you start putting these things into categories or boxes. You start seeing there's stuff that would not fit into a box. This for us is a 0 day. This is a sign that there's something new out there. We need to label it and figure out what it is. And deep learning does great with those kind of things. It surfaces them immediately. And then your job is just to figure out exactly, put a label on it of what this is. And we actually found a whole bunch of campaigns using the COVID-19 theme before the term COVID existed. It was the coronavirus. And we basically approached several journalists like, hey, we're seeing something here. We believe this is going to be an emerging trend. And this was back in early December, January, where nobody had even heard of, or nobody had imagined the impact this would have, and nobody had even heard of Wuhan. We approached several journalists with the story, And unfortunately, nobody contacted us back because they just didn't think there was much interest, so they never heard of Wuhan. The only one journalist who had contacted our PR agency thought we were talking about the Wu-Tang Clan. They thought like, oh, okay, maybe this is about celebrity phishing. And back, that story eventually in January got published just because of the fact it took off. And that's kind of an example of how deep learning surfaces these things or recognizes the noise in the signal in the noise when it comes to a lot of data. What I wanted to talk to you guys about was really quickly why deep learning. Why is deep learning a better approach compared to some of the other technologies out there? And given the results of the poll, I think we're all on the same page because the faster IR thing is literally the last thing I have on the slide here. So why deep learning? Because it could be protocols or payloads. The more complex the problem is and the greater the variety, deep learning is much better at crunching those things and coming with up structures. And again, it scales with data. Large amounts of data, it does even better. And more importantly, to tie it in the question of faster IR, inference occurs in milliseconds. Imagine a SOC team that is really small, but you've got thousands of files, right? Sandboxing will take forever. Other approaches about reverse engineering will take forever. You're drowning your SOC team, right? What do? You apply data science to it, and it gives them the ability to immediately triage thousands of samples in seconds. Perfect. And here's an example. Now, this graph probably looks confusing because it's not been labeled properly, and that was intentional. Gajraj and I talked about this. This graph is just too complex, right? But that's exactly the point I wanted to get across, which is deep learning doesn't care about if something is complex, if it's not. The human perception of it, or what is this new emerging science of explainability around why did it come to that conclusion, or what does that conclusion mean, is something that humans need to better get an understanding on and answer. But for deep learning, you give it a problem, it crunches through it. So this particular problem that we have given it is, given a volume or a snapshot of outbound DNS traffic, can you identify domain generation algorithms? Now, for those who are not familiar with it, domain generation algorithms are used by malware to complicate the detection process. It's basically in a sense, it's an algorithm that's generating domains on the fly based on a certain algorithm. That way, you cannot block the outbound domains because they don't exist. They only exist just because the author or the bot person who created it is just registering those domains randomly, and then once it finds that right domain, it connects the C2 domain. And again, this is largely to basically prevent threat intelligence to develop around a domain, because if it doesn't exist, there is no threat intelligence, right? So what deep learning does, every time we're throwing it against a domain generation algorithm, it has come back with the ability not only to identify an infected host, it also was within milliseconds able to tell us that this is the domain generated algorithm that's running here, the name of it, the associated family, and immediately able to help us identify which host we needed to identify to deal with the incident. And a few words on PCA graphs. Now, PCA graphs is, like Drudge called out with the moving animation. They're basically a way, it stands for principal component analysis. And full disclosure, I'm not a data science guy. The data science guy helped me put this slide together. It's essentially a way for humans to understand or conceptualize what deep learning algorithms are telling us as a result. Like the previous graph I showed you, deep learning is really good at crunching numbers or high dimensional data, where you've got something broken down into an atomic level and you've got it clustered, and that's what's happening here. And we can actually show you a demo of it. So what we're going to be showing you is just like that phishing thing where we had identified a new category of phishing or a new theme of phishing. What happened a couple of months ago for us was basically we came across this one sample that was used in a targeted attack in the Middle East. And what we realized was this sample, using a PCA graph, was clustering with other threats that we had seen before. And we realized nobody else in the industry had called it out at that point in time. And this particular attack was on a the National Petroleum Company of Bahrain. And what we did was when we dropped it in our quadrant of samples to identify, does it match up with other stuff, we realized that this particular family that was dubbed Dustman immediately fit in the same quadrant as other families called Zero Clear. In fact, the day we went to press with this was the same day another security company, IBM X-Force, who's done some great work, had announced an older version And here we were telling journalists, hey, we found a newer version of something, not knowing what IBM had announced. And they say, wait, do you mean Dustman is a new family, or is this something related to the Zero Clear family that this other company is talking about? We're saying, no, this is a completely new beast. And it just took us a couple of milliseconds, as Gajraj is doing. Our SOC team were able to immediately put this in a graph. And as you can see, Gajraj, if you want to zoom in, zoom out, you can basically identify not only do the samples that are the closest together or have the closest overlapping characteristics, but also differentiate how different it is from other variants in that same family. You gamify data analysis for the SOC team. We're overloaded and stressed, and you literally have the ability for them to visually highlight an unknown family within a couple of seconds with a high degree of accuracy and precision.
So the 3 blue dots is what Irfan is referring to, that you got, immediately you can see, when I started, you were seeing only 1 dot because they were kind of like overlapping on one of the dimensions. But here, as I move across different dimensions, I can see that it's not one, actually, there are 3 different variants. And the model has clearly labeled them as, variants of Dustman. You can see it shows up, right? And these are just general, malware that are falling in other categories.
Exactly. And the ones that are closest to it, the one that Gajraj is seeing on the orange, happen to be the ones that essentially, basically IBM X-Force announced as a new variant on that same day. And we could immediately confirm, no, there's even a newer variant out.
Yeah. So this is the power of, the PCA, that is powered again by deep learning, right? That, with very little effort, you can actually quickly in real time. Oh, that's the other point, that, all of this analysis is happening in real time. It's not, post-infection. It's not, millions of data points that we have collected afterwards and done, a data lake, based analysis. This is happening in real time on real traffic being inspected, by our appliances.
I believe what you're asking is how successful can AI be to establish the quality of a data feed? Is that correct? It comes down to not only that it can help you identify the quality of a data feed faster, if you use it as what they call features in a larger model, but you also have the ability to use AI, this may be a flip on the question, to act as a substitute in case they're an absence of intelligence or threat intelligence or a data feed. And I'll give you an example with what we had talked about, data generation algorithms. It's a chicken and an egg problem. The reason why a lot of malware authors use data generation algorithms, domain generation algorithms in their malware families is because it makes it really complicated to stop or block those domains. If they don't exist before a certain amount of time, before the right time in the algorithm makes it, visible, you cannot put threat intelligence around it. You can't block it. So what AI helps us do is basically identify, hey, there's a domain generation algorithm that is at work here. It helps us identify, in the absence of AI, what is the host that is responsible for that, and gives us the ability to basically, take actions without the presence of domain generation, without the presence of threat intelligence. And we've got several blogs on our site that actually also kind of is on this topic of how can you use AI to not only, augment your threat intelligence feeds, but also help you cut down on the noise, because here's the problem. You've got feeds coming in, and in most cases, a lot of people have multiple feeds, right? They may also be saying contradictory information about the same, URL or file or something. How do you know which one is right? So we can use AI to also kind of help us filter out that noise and figure out which one's right or which one has a consistent record of being right.
I also wanted to make one more offer that, Victor has already made the raffle offer. I'm making one more offer to you. That we have this guided tour. It gives you a first-hand online experience. You don't have to install anything, just sign up and we'll create an account for you so you can play and walk through an online demo guided tour of our product and see the power of AI for yourself, right? And no obligation, no commitment. It's basically up to you, how you want to take advantage of this. And if you complete the tour, we also have a $1,000 raffle. We'll enter you into that, and maybe you get lucky. Also, Irfan mentioned about explainability. We have a white paper. I unfortunately did not list it, but if you reach out to us, we'd be happy to share that with you. We have a lot of other resources that Irfan's team has put together on the ransomware research. We have a complete blog category. I think there's about 15 or 25 blogs available there in that first URL. Please take a second and just take a screenshot so you can have all of these resources if that's of interest to you. And also, I think Victor is sharing the slide deck, so you will have access to it, after the event as well.